There's no denying that the Indiana Hoosiers got better through the transfer portal, but the question is, how much better?
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, and it's the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. Appreciate you being here, making this your first listen each and every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Shout out to all of my everydayers, those of you that truly make this your first listen each and every day and come back each and every day. So thank you so much for doing that. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, as I said, there is no denying. You cannot put this away. You cannot block it out. You cannot not accept it. The Indiana Hoosiers have gotten better through the transfer portal with Mike Woodson and this coaching staff. With the additions of Oumar Ballo, who we're going to talk about today, who has officially signed with the Indiana Hoosiers, which is a big deal, and I'll tell you why. Also, some football news later on in the show as well. But you add Oumar Ballo, Kanaan Carlyle, Myles Rice, Luke Goody. I don't think we're done. Plus, you have Bryson Tucker coming in through the high school ranks. This team has gotten better. But I ask you this question, and I leave this open to you. If you're on the YouTube channel, you can comment down below. If you're following us on X, you can tweet at us there at Locked On Hoosiers. How much better has this team gotten with their additions through the transfer portal? And I think the best way to look at this is to look at last year's schedule. And I know we don't know what this team's going to look like, and it's going to take some time for them to mesh and to mold and for us to really find out what this team's going to be. But just from a talent perspective, I think we can go back and look at last year's schedule and see where, if we have this current roster, where we believe Indiana would have won games that they lost. And I think there's a lot of them because there were so many games last year where just a little bit better guard play or just a little less fouling or a little bit more shot making would have won you the basketball game. And remember, this is an Indiana team that ended up being 500 in Big Ten play, ended up being 10-10 overall in the conference. And I still think there's many, many wins in the conference and out of the conference that Indiana could have won with the current roster that they have right now. Indiana was 19-14 overall last year, 10-10 in conference play. And yeah, you started out with 3 straight wins against your lower, lesser opponents. Those would have all been less stressful with the current roster that we have against Florida Gulf Coast, Army, and Wright State, because, yes, we stressed in all of those games, if you remember. Then you played in the Empire Classic, where you got your doors blown off against UConn, which ended up being the national champion, so I'm not too concerned about that, not too worried. Would it have been more competitive? Maybe. We don't know, but maybe. And you probably would not have won that game. I think we can all be a little humble here and just admit we probably don't win that game regardless, because that's a really good UConn team. But then you beat Louisville, beat Harvard, beat Maryland, beat Michigan on the road, which we thought at the time was a really nice win. Ended up not being all that great because Michigan was the worst team in the Big Ten, and they've got a lot better, by the way. But then it's these 2 games right here that I really want to talk about before we truly get into conference play. The game against Auburn in Atlanta, and then the game against Kansas right here in Bloomington. Those 2 games are very intriguing to me because the Auburn game, they just ran up and down the floor, made every shot possible, and just absolutely obliterated you inside of State Farm Arena. 104-76. Sorry to bring that up again. But if you had some guards that could slow them down, I think you maybe can weather the storm a little bit. And remember, in this game, Indiana started out hot. We started out knocking down threes, the first 3 of them out of the gate, out of the ball game, right? We were on a 9-0 run just like that. And then Auburn got their feet underneath them and just put it on you. And look, the way they were playing that night, I don't care if we had the dream team from the Olympics. I just don't think anybody was beating that Auburn team that night, which is crazy because then they get all the way to the tournament and they lose first round to Yale. But whatever. I just don't think we were going to beat them that night. Do I think it's more competitive? Yeah, absolutely I do. And so that game just washed that one down the drain. But the Kansas game, the number 2 team in the country, comes to Bloomington, where Trey Galloway has one of the best games of his entire career, just didn't get the help that he needed outside of that, and you lose 75-71. Remember, Trey Galloway had 28 points. He got 14 from Mbako, got 13 from Renew, and got 11 from Ware, and 2 from Gabe Cupps, and 3 from Anthony Walker. That's it. And you only lost by 4 to what is a really good Kansas team. And at the time, they were still the number 2 team in the country. That's a win with this roster. That is a win with this current roster right now. You get more from Ballo. You get more from Rice. You get more from Carlyle than you do any of those guys, other than Trey Galloway, of course. But you would get more than 2 points out of one of those guys. Out of Myles Rice, you're going to get more than 2 points in a big game against Kansas. I'm just going to be real. Ballo gets more than 11 points like Khalil Ware did. Mbako had 14. That's all you need from him. Renew had 13. That's all you need from him. But guess what? You added another true starting center and a true starting point guard. At that point, that gives you more wins. And that is a win right there against Kansas. More points equals more wins in my book. And I think Indiana would have won that game with the current roster that they have, because you played really well. And if you get any sort of bench help, which Indiana has added as well, I think you win that game by double digits, which should be exciting to you. That should be exciting for this Indiana team and the Indiana fan base to know that you have a more competitive roster this season. Other games in non-conference play, you didn't really have a whole lot of struggle there with the Morehead State, let me say this. You struggled, but you got the wins, okay? You beat Morehead State, you beat UNA, and then you beat Kennesaw State. Then that takes you into conference play. And that's where I want to go next. That's where I want to go next on our next segment, because there are some games in conference play that this team could have won easily with the current roster that they have. But there's no doubting that we got better. We got better as a team, and I think there are 4, 5, 6 games in conference play possibly that we would have won with this current roster. If everything comes together like it should, you would have won more of these games. And I want to talk about that coming up next on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Game Time. Look, Game Time is the authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which means getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, and I can tell you firsthand that is true. With last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats with their zone deals. And they're all in pricing. When you toggle this feature, it shows up the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. And they've got ticket coverage with Game Time. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, it is playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Teams are getting eliminated left and right. Series are getting extended into 5, 6, 7 games. You've got baseball going on right now as well. And FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150. Win or lose, all you got to do is sign up, put a $5 bet down, and you're going to get $150. That's how you do it. Doesn't matter if you win the bet or not. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So if you haven't downloaded FanDuel, what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here, making this your first listen each and every day. If you're on the YouTube channel, be sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We are oh so close to 2,400 subscribers as of right now. As of this recording, we are 7 away from 2,400. So if you haven't done that, why not? It's free. It's easy. It takes just one tap of the thumb. And thank you so much for doing that. Also, if you're on the audio version, thank you so much as well. You can send this to anybody. Make sure all your family and friends are listening to it. Follow us on there. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Well, want to keep talking about the wins that I think Indiana has added this offseason through the transfer portal. And one of those is because of Oumar Ballo, who has officially signed with the Indiana Hoosiers, which is a big deal because in today's world of college basketball, college football, college sports, you just never truly know until it's finalized. I mean, anything can happen from the day that the kid says, I commit to Indiana, or I commit to Alabama, or I commit to Washington. Until they sign, anything can happen. And even then, here's what's crazy too. Even then, you can sign and then request that they release your NLI, your National Letter of Intent. So until they show up and start playing games, you can't even feel 100% confident. And that's just the world of sports now in college, which I hate it. I think it's terrible, but it is what it is. There's not a whole lot I can do about it. But good news is Ballo has signed. And so he will officially be an Indiana Hoosier. He's going to be your starting center this coming fall, winter, and next spring for Mike Woodson and the Hoosiers. And that adds a bunch of wins, in my opinion. We've already said that you probably would have won the Kansas game in your non-conference schedule if you had this roster. I don't think you were going to win the Auburn game, and I don't think you were going to win the UConn game. I think you were playing two really good teams, two teams that were better than you and playing better than you that night. But you win that Kansas game. So there's one. Keep that on your tracker, all right? There's one win. Then you go back into Big Ten play after you win your first two, right? And you go on the road to Nebraska, where you lose 86-70. And let me just remind you of the point totals in this game. And it wasn't horrible. It really wasn't bad, but defensively, it was abysmal, okay? That's where we found out about Keisei Tominaga. That's where the world found out about Keisei Tominaga because he did it to Indiana twice. 28 points in that game. Also had players with 15, 12, 11, and most of those, all of those were guards. All of them were guards who were just going off against you. And something that I don't think people are talking enough about when it comes to Carlyle and Rice is their defensive capabilities, their defensive presence that they're going to bring to this Indiana team. They're not going to be the most elite, dominant guarded defenders you've ever seen in your life, but they are going to be good. And I can promise you, they are going to be better than what Indiana put out there last year. And I like the guys. It has nothing to do with anything personal. But Gabe Cupp should not have been starting in the Big Ten. Let's just be real. The amount of times he got blown by, shot over, scored on, got a screen set on him, and he was just disappeared, that cannot happen anymore. Xavier Johnson, when he was healthy, he's good, but he wasn't always healthy, and it wasn't always out there. Trey Galloway wasn't your best defending guard in the world. He had some size, but he wasn't the best defender. I tried to hype him up. I tried to get him going, but it didn't work. You must not listen to the show. That's unfortunate. And it just wasn't what you needed from these guys. I think you have gotten better there. I really do think Carlyle and Rice's defense would have slowed down Tominaga. He's still going to get his, but you could stop Bryce Williams from going for 15. You could stop Lawrence from 12. You could stop these guys from going off against you because it was the guards that tore you up. The forwards didn't do anything. They had 13 total points. Okay, that's fine. Nebraska didn't have a whole lot of size. Indiana could have overcome that. I think that's a win. I think that's a win, man. If you just score a little bit more and play a little bit better defense, I think you should always win that game on the road at Nebraska. So there's two. You come home and you beat Ohio State. You go on the road and you play that Rutgers team and you lose 66-57. You only scored 57 points. Man, Ballo, Rice, and Carlyle should combine for 50 points every game, every night. That's how I feel about it. That's exactly how I feel. plus Renew and Mbako coming back who are going to be better. Yeah, that's another win that you should probably have. But you know what? It's on the road. It's on the road at Rutgers. So you know what? I'll say no. I'll say no just for the sake of argument, just to keep it fair. But that's a game you should expect to win too. So I've got at least two. All right, I have two. Come home, you beat Minnesota. You come home and you play Purdue. You probably weren't going to win that game, but it's going to be a hell of a lot more competitive, right? I think we can all agree on that. You go to Wisconsin, didn't play great. Go at Illinois and you lose 70-62. You absolutely win that game. You absolutely, without a doubt, you win that Illinois game on the road if you've got this current roster with portal guys, Bryson Tucker, young guys still, and I think the important part about this too is the fact that you bring Malik Renew and Mackenzie Mbako, who are going to be better, and Trey Galloway. So you bring the experience, but I think all of those guys, well, I think Renew and Mbako will get better. I think Trey Galloway is what he is at this point. But you win that game on the road at Illinois. I believe that. I do. I believe that. So what is that? 3 now I've got? You beat Iowa after that. Then, gosh, man, going through this schedule is depressing. Then you come home and you play that Penn State team who just embarrassed you on your home floor. A bad Penn State team. 85-71. Yeah, you should win that game with this roster too. Give me 4 wins. You beat Ohio State on the road. That was a good win. You went to Purdue and lost. That's fine. You lose at home to Northwestern by 4. There's another one. You come home and you lose to Nebraska. They did it to you again. There's another one. Let's say we split the Nebraska series. I don't care if it's on the road or at home. Let's just say you split that, right? Then you go on the road and lose to Penn State. You got swept by the Nittany Lions. That does not happen next year. I've lost count. We're pushing 6-7 more wins already this year, ladies and gentlemen. You come home, you beat that Wisconsin team. This is when you started winning some games, right? You go and you beat Wisconsin, you beat Maryland, you beat Minnesota, and then you beat Michigan State. Yeah. So instead of going 10-10, I've got Indiana with 16 conference wins. That's pretty good. That's pretty darn good, if you ask me. Now, does that always play out the way that I said it was going to? No, of course not. And we'll never know. It's the biggest what-if game in the world. But what I'm saying is, what I'm trying to get to is the fact that 10-10 should not happen next year. Okay, 19-14 should not happen next year. You should have a good record in the Big Ten. You should have some big non-conference games and non-conference wins because we don't fully know the schedule, but what we do know is that we're going to be in the battle for Atlantis with some really big teams. Arizona, Gonzaga, Louisville, Creighton, West Virginia, Oklahoma, and Davidson. You have a chance to get some big non-conference wins, unlike last year, because you didn't get those wins. You had your chances, you just didn't get them. You're going to have an ability to do that again this year, and I think you start winning those because of what Mike Woodson and this coaching staff have done through the transfer portal. Well, coming up in our final segment on Locked On Hoosiers, a little bit of football news as Curt Cignetti and the defensive side, they took a hit. They took a hit through the portal. We'll talk about that coming up on our final segment on Locked On Hoosiers. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there is just so much good stuff in this game that we got to keep talking about it. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Monopoly Go, game on. Final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here. A shout out to all of my everydayers, those of you that come back each and every day, making this your first listen each and every day. On the football side of things, the Indiana Hoosiers and head coach Curt Cignetti, they took a blow in the transfer portal unfortunately, on Monday. Starting corner Kobe Minor has entered the transfer portal, a guy that started 9 games. He was also an all Big Ten honorable mention on the defensive side of the football, somebody that really was going to be a playmaker this season in the back end of the defense for Curt Cignetti and this staff. He entered the transfer portal. And while this may not have been overly expected early on, it seemed like this could have been coming down the pipe is kind of what it seems like. Because, and the reason I say that, his older brother, right, Daryl Minor, who was on the team, he entered the transfer portal as well. And with that, it's just, it really is unfortunate because he was going to be a good player, man. And he already was a good player. He was going to be somebody that Curt Cignetti could come in on the defensive side and really rely on to be a leader on the defense. Now, I have not heard a whole lot about this. I kind of knew it was coming down the pipe. I didn't know if it was going to actually happen. But in terms of, I guess, why it happened, I don't fully know right now. And hopefully we get some more details. And this could be a couple of things, okay? This could be, it just wasn't, maybe he was ready to go somewhere else, right? Maybe Minor just wasn't a fan of Curt Cignetti or the coaching staff or how the system was running. Or it could have been Cignetti and the staff saying, hey, man, we appreciate the work you've done here, but I think it's time we go a different direction. It's a combination of these things when it comes to the portal. But it really is unfortunate because he started 9 games, played in 11, and was as I mentioned, all Big Ten honorable mention with 29 tackles and 4 pass breakups last year. Somebody that I think was going to be just a huge spot. I think his run defense was really impactful too. And now you got to replace that. Now you got to replace that with a bunch of young puppies back there. Here's a list of who Indiana has in the back end now on cornerbacks that are on scholarship right now. You've got a 5th-year senior in Cedarius Doss, so hopefully he sticks around because Lord knows we need him. You have the junior with Johnson. You've got the other junior, JoJo Johnson, redshirt sophomore Jamari Sharp, freshman Dontre Henderson, and freshman Josh Philiston. So you're pretty young back there other than Cedarius Doss. You got a couple juniors, some sophomores, and some freshmen. What that tells me is you better go get somebody. And maybe that's what's happening here, right? Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe the Hoosiers and Curt Cignetti are going after a new corner, a couple of new guys on the defensive side, and maybe it was Minor just kind of reading the signs and reading the writing on the wall, right? There's so many possibilities here on what this could be, and it may not be any of those. Who knows? But this was a hit. There's no doubt about it. And the Hoosiers are going to have to figure out something on the defensive side. That was a struggle last year at times. A lot of it was the offense not being able to move and get the ball down the field and, of course, put points on the board. But defensively for football, the big plays, trying to avoid giving up those big chunk plays, big yardage touchdowns, the huge plays, right? The 50-yard bombs, all that type of stuff. Those have to go away. Like, you cannot give up 2 of those per game and expect to win football games in the Big Ten. It's just not going to happen in a conference that typically does not score a whole lot of points. Now, yes, Ohio State does at times and things like that, but overall, the Big Ten is not your go-to scoring conference. So when you give up those big chunk plays and you give up those highlight reel touchdowns, you're playing from behind immediately because we don't know what Indiana's offense is going to be. We have confidence in the wide receiver room that I think is going to be solid and a running back room that's going to anchor this team in a good way. But until we figure out what the offense can do and kind of what the scoring ability is going to be with that side of the football, the defense has got to step up. They've got to limit the big plays, stop the run, and keep their team in the ball game. And if you don't, you're going to be in trouble. And losing a guy like Minor is unfortunate. So it is what it is. And here's the thing too, the portal closed today. The portal's closed. So anybody that has not entered, you cannot enter anymore. So he entered right there at the deadline, the day before it closed. Now, anybody that's in the portal can still commit, so you'll still see news going along as we go, but the portal has officially closed for football. Basketball is a whole different story, and that's a whole different conversation. But the portal is closed for football, so Nobody else can enter. That's it. Indiana is who they are unless they start adding some more through the portal, which I think they could. I think they should. And we'll kind of keep you updated on that as we go for Curt Cignetti and Indiana football. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Look, I appreciate you being here again, making this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. If you're on audio, thank you so much for being there. Be sure you send it out to all your Indiana family and friends. Be sure you follow on there, hit the subscribe button if you can, turn on notifications so you never miss an episode of audio for Locked On Hoosiers. And for those of you that are looking at me right now on the YouTube video, you can like this video, subscribe to our channel, pushing towards 2,400 subscribers. Yes, we are just crushing it here at Locked On Hoosiers, and the folks upstairs are taking notice. So thank you so much for that. Also, comment down below anything that we talked about today, from the win total to Oumar Ballo to football as well. I want to see you engaging there. I'll be in there in a little bit as well. So until tomorrow, Hoosier fans, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.